What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. I have some breaking news to report, and that is that the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., civil rights icon who gained worldwide acclaim for his work, is currently hospitalized in Chicago. A person familiar with the situation who spoke to NBC Chicago on the condition of anonymity told the station that Jackson is hospitalized in Chicago. Jackson is in the hospital under observation for progressive supranuclear palsy, according to a statement from the organization he founded that fights for social change from its Chicago headquarters, the Rainbow Push Coalition. Rainbow Push said in the statement, quote, "He has been managing this neurodegenerative condition for more than a decade. He was originally diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. However, last April, his PSP condition was confirmed." Rainbow Push added that Jackson's family, quote, "appreciates all prayers at this time." The 84-year-old gained national attention for his work in promoting civil rights, working with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and ultimately founding the Rainbow Push Coalition. Jackson was ordained after attending school at Chicago Theological Seminary and became a fixture of the religious and political scenes in the city for decades, sometimes clashing with leaders like former mayors Richard J. Daley and Jane Byrne, and often working with local groups on education programs and anti-violence programs. He also is a nationally renowned figure, receiving dozens of honorary degrees and speaking to audiences around the world. Ultimately, Jackson would launch multiple bids for president, competing in the 1984 Democratic primaries and then winning 11 primaries in 1988 before ultimately losing out on the nomination to Michael Dukakis. Through it all, Jackson continued his work with a variety of organizations, especially the Rainbow Push Coalition, which he helped found. Jackson became known as a fierce advocate for Black students to excel in school, pushing educational programs and for reforms across the country. He also advocated for criminal justice reform, pushing for legislation cracking down on illegal drugs, and seeking strategies to reduce Black-on-Black crime. He fought hard on behalf of Palestinian rights and fought apartheid in South Africa, repeatedly pushing for the release of Nelson Mandela in the 1980s. Jackson was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, of former President Bill Clinton in 2000. In recent years, Jackson has faced health challenges, revealing a Parkinson's disease diagnosis in 2017. Still, he has remained active in the fight for civil rights, pushing for strengthened voting rights legislation and fighting for criminal justice reform after the shooting death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Jackson stepped down as head of Rainbow Push in 2023 and has remained largely private in recent years. I think for those young people of our community that were born in the so-called, or came of age, I should say, not born, but came of age in the so-called post-racial America, which we all knew didn't really exist. If you grew up, your consciousness, I should say, as a young person, you grew up in the Obama era, then you don't really remember Dr. Jesse Jackson. I'm 45, right? So I remember Jesse Jackson really in the 90s, but those who are a little bit older than me say 50 and above will really remember Jesse at his apex, which was the 80s. Now, I will say this. I understand Jesse has his detractors. There are some who will, if you do a little bit of research, I'm just saying, if you go down that rabbit hole, they're going to tell you, Jesse was not what he always seemed. And, go into the whole thing with Dr. King. And I know all about that. Okay. I've done my research. I know all about all of that. Right. But having said all of that, if you look at every president we've had, I would say since Kennedy, with the exception of Donald Trump, almost just about all of them have some ties to the CIA. Either working for them or working with them. So you guys vote for them. I'm just going to put it like that, right? Now, going back to Jesse Jackson, I think Jesse was the closest thing we had to a hope for a black president. The closest thing. He ran in 84. That was more of I don't want to say it was a token campaign, but he had a little bit of support in 84. But 88 was the one where he really made noise. At one point, Jesse Jackson had a delegate lead. I forgot exactly when it was. It might have been in February of 88, but at one point he had a delegate lead. And Black Americans were coming out in record numbers voting for Jesse Jackson, but he also, now he was super liberal, but he had captured the black vote and he had captured a lot of white liberals. And surprisingly, you could argue that they were doing it strategically because they wanted the weakest candidate to come out of the Democratic Party to be more beatable. But he actually got some support from some former white segregationists. If I remember correctly, Orville Faubus, the former segregationist, well, that wouldn't make sense because he was still a Democrat at the time. So I can't say that it was strategically he was trying to get the weakest candidate. Orville Faubus was still a Democrat. Orville Faubus, who was a former segregationist and a former governor of Arkansas, and as a matter of fact, I believe Orville Faubus was a mentor to Bill Clinton, which goes to show you what I mean by how a lot of Democrats can still be racist. Orville Faubus supported Jesse Jackson's campaign in 1988, but I've always thought the Democratic Party did Jesse wrong. They marginalized him because when you think about it, Jesse, if I recall correctly, was second in delegates and votes to Michael Dukakis in 1988, right? So technically, you look at the coalition that Jesse was able to build. One of the things that Michael Dukakis lacked was excitement. He was one of the most boring, uninspiring candidates we ever had. Technically, you would think that he should have been a vice presidential nominee. But of course, for obvious reasons, because he was black, they didn't really consider him. And they picked Lloyd Bentsen, hoping that he could carry Texas, which he had no help in. I think they still lost Texas by 1 million votes in 1988. By 1996, Jesse Jackson had to practically beg to get speaking time on the Democratic convention. And that, my friends, is why I don't think likely, nor do I feel any affinity for Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and that era, largely because of how they did Jesse. Now, he did have Jesse as a spiritual advisor when he was going through his crises, right? And then the media talked about how, oh, well, how could Jesse be a spiritual advisor when he's gone, he's had his, peccadillos, supposedly Jesse had a child out of wedlock and all that. And I was like, wait a minute. Jesse's not really a politician anymore. You know what I'm saying? Jesse's not a politician. And a lot of these reporters, you guys are talking, let's look into your past. Let's see what some of you guys have done. You know what I'm saying? And they try to and that was also them trying to flip blame from Clinton to Jesse. But anyway, because they didn't like Jesse, a lot of people didn't like Jesse because of the fact they thought he was too flippant. I recall also in the mid 90s with Jesse Jackson, I think it was in 94, was it? I think it was sometime in the mid 90s when Jesse Jackson went over to, oh man, it's a long time ago. I'm trying to remember the details, but I think he tried to, he pissed off the Clinton administration with this. I think he basically went over to North Korea, was it? And he acted as an unofficial Secretary of State, trying to negotiate foreign policy and trying to come over as a goodwill ambassador via the United States. And, Clinton basically had to say, look, Jesse Jackson does not speak. He's not elected official. He's not appointed. He doesn't speak for our administration, whatever. And a lot of people thought he was too uppity. That's what he pretty much was. They thought he was too uppity. I think that's what it was. Or was it, or am I mixing them up with going over to Iraq and speaking to Saddam Hussein? It's been a while. I forgot exactly what it was. It was either he went to Iraq or he went to North Korea. I know Jimmy Carter went to North Korea in 1994 to speak to Kim Il-sung in talks with trying to denuclearize the nation, North Korea, and they were having some success. And then I'm not gonna say surprisingly, but then Kim Il-sung just up and dies like weeks later, and Kim Jong-il becomes the dictator over there, new leader. Another thing that they don't like about Jesse, that they hold against him, was some comments that he made in 1984. I don't want to go into it on YouTube, but he said something that a lot of people weaponized against him, supposedly, about a particular ethnicity that dominate New York City. Okay, it supposedly said in a derogatory manner. You can look it up and see what I'm talking about there. So Jesse was Jesse, man. I'm gonna tell you something. The way that article was worded, and when you look at that disorder, progressive supranuclear palsy, I think it's called. Linda Ronstadt has it, that ended her singing career. Dudley Moore had it, the comedian / actor, or comic actor / comic actor. Dudley Moore. I'm kind of I'm concerned by the way that article was written, man, and Jesse's been ill for a long time, man. Diagnosed with Parkinson's, apparently misdiagnosed. Apparently had this supranuclear palsy illness the whole time. Before that, for at least the last 10 years, you can see he was declining physically. When I look up this illness, it doesn't have a cure. So let's have, it's may not, Jesse's had a good life. 84 years. 84 years, man. He's been around ever since I was a little kid. And for all of his flaws, because I'm not trying to make him out to be a deity, but I think for all of his life, the net of his life was positive. And for my parents' generation, Jesse was as close to Dr. King as we had. Now, I would never hold him, me personally, as high in esteem as Dr. King, but Jesse, you know what I'm saying, his intentions were good. His intentions were good. Of course, you know, you had Minister Louis Farrakhan, who would criticize Jesse, say that Jesse was outreaching too much to others. But, you know, Jesse's intentions, I thought, were, for the most part, good. Well, could he be self-serving? Obviously. But anyway, man, just want to report this news, man. Tell me what you guys think.